Hello and welcome to Pemberley and Beyond. I'm Kat, and as regular listeners will know, my last experience of stepping outside my comfort zone of Pride and Prejudice retellings ended in disaster when I read Recipe for Persuasion by Sonali Dev. Nonetheless, I fell head over heels for the beautiful cover of this episode's novel when I saw it in my local library. I know that there's that old chestnut about not judging books by their cover, but what can I say? I was gifted with millennial optimism at birth. So when I beheld it, I thought to myself, could this beautiful cover break the curse of terrible non-Pride and Prejudice retellings? I mean, I sure hoped it would. Welcome to the world of Emma of 83rd Street by Audrey Bellezza and Emily Harding. Published in 2023, it harks back to a world of generational wealth that I can no longer imagine, even though studies show that it is both as prevalent as ever and more pronounced than ever before. Now, sit back and relax with a cup of tea or other beverage, for it is time to read the back cover. Beautiful, clever, and rich, Emma Woodhouse has lived 23 years in her tight-knit Upper East Side neighbourhood with very little to distress or vex her. That is, until her budding matchmaking hobby results in her sister's marriage and subsequent move downtown. Now, with her sister gone and all her friends travelling abroad, Emma must start her final year of grad school grappling with an entirely new emotion: boredom. So when she meets Nadine, a wide-eyed Ohio transplant with a heart of gold and drugstore blonde highlights to match, Emma not only sees a potential new friend, but a new project. If only her overbearing neighbour George Knightley would get out of her way. Handsome, smart, and successful. The only thing that frustrates Knightley more than a corked whiskey is his childhood friend Emma. Whether it's her shopping sprees between classes or her revolving door of ill-conceived hobbies, he is only too happy to lecture her on all the finer points of adulthood she's been so hell-bent on ignoring. But despite his gripes, and much to his own chagrin, Knightley can't help but notice that the girl next door is a woman now, one who he suddenly can't get out of his head. As Emma's best-laid plans collide with everyone, from hipster baristas to meddling family members to flaky playboy millionaires, these two friends slowly realize their need to always be right has been usurped by a new need entirely. And it's not long before they discover that even the most familiar stories still have some surprises. Straight out the gate, I absolutely adored this novel. I'm going to talk about the three tropes that I liked most in it. In first place, we have the matchmaker trope. One of the central tropes in Emma of 83rd Street is naturally, as you've heard from the blurb, the matchmaker trope. Emma's self-appointed mission to arrange the lives of those around her drives much of the plot, and Bellezza and Harding handle it with humour, insight, and a contemporary twist. Unlike the Regency-era original, where matchmaking is often subtle and genteel, Emma's interventions in this novel are energetic, occasionally disastrous, and thoroughly modern. A key element in this trope is Emma's relationship with Nadine, her chosen best friend, and the 21st century analogue of Harriet Smith. Nadine provides both inspiration and a foil for Emma's matchmaking adventures. Emma sees Nadine as a project, someone she can guide and help navigate the labyrinth of friendship and romance in her social milieu. The dynamic between them is playful, but tends to get more fraught as it goes along, illustrating that matchmaking is as much about understanding human complexity as it is about orchestrating romantic outcomes. Bellezza and Harding add a modern twist by making Nadine an active participant in her own life rather than a passive subject, which is something that rather breaks with the original. So while Emma's attempting to influence her friends' choices in Emma of 83rd Street, Nadine has her own ambitions, opinions, sense of style, and these small reversals of expectation which lead to some rather comedic misunderstandings between her and Emma. I thought this preserved the charm of the Emma-Harriet pairing, but updated it for contemporary readers who expect female friendships to be mutual, layered, and honestly, a lot less self-seeking and two-dimensional than I find they are in Emma. It's impossible to discuss modern adaptations of Emma without mentioning Clueless, and the echoes are obvious here. Just as Cher wields her matchmaking powers across Beverly Hills, Emma of 83rd Street applies her energy and wit to her Upper East Side world. Wardrobes, shoes, and carefully curated Instagram-worthy outfits become the modern equivalent of Gothic novels. And through fashion, we see Emma navigating social hierarchies and trying to mold her friends' tastes, ambitions, and romantic prospects. Overall, I found the humor of the trope shone through in moments when Emma's attempts to matchmake collide with Nadine's unpredictability, from small social faux pas to unintended entanglements with classmates and friends. At risk of misquoting Pride and Prejudice, I thought that underneath the comedy lay a universal truth. The desire to help those we care about can create chaos. In Emma of 83rd Street, the matchmaker trope is not only a source of humour, but also a vehicle for character development and gave an insight into the modern social landscape, making Emma and Nadine's relationship the beating heart of the novel. And speaking of character development, leads me on to trope 2, the personal growth arc. Emma's personal growth in this novel flows naturally from her matchmaking adventures. As she tries to shape the lives of those around her, she is forced to confront her own assumptions and ambitions. Her final year of grad school, the absence of her sister, the distance of friends who've all gone abroad for one reason or another, have created space that she could fill with introspection, but instead chooses to fill with anything to distract her from what she classes as boredom. Bellezza and Harding present growth as gradual. So we've got Emma experimenting with new hobbies and wrestling with her growing romantic feelings towards Knightley. Every misstep illuminates another aspect of her personality, especially her impulsiveness and her desire for control. The character growth arc was enriched by the sheer realness of it. I know I've said about Emma being unrelatable on some level, coming from this incredibly wealthy background. But the way that we see her shifting her understanding of herself and repositioning herself from the center of her universe to realizing that she is on the peripheral of others' relationships really changes up the dynamics of her relationships with those characters. I felt that every single story arc that we had in the novel planted the seed for a new arc of character growth in the next section of it. Every mistake that she makes became a moment of vulnerability, which she either chooses to ignore and gloss over, or she uses it to propel herself forward and start to take accountability. I also like the fact that this arc, or rather trope, wasn't too worthy. There was a great deal of humour used throughout to show the challenges of this growth. I think that it really spoke to the messiness of growing as a person, because obviously learning about oneself and working out one's goals and attaining those is rarely a straightforward process. And the personal growth trope here in Emma of 83rd Street felt really authentic because, as I've said, it emerges naturally from the story's relationships. So overall, I adored it. And of course, could it even be an Emma retelling without there being the friends to lovers trope? Honestly, no retelling of Emma could be complete without it. Obviously, the novel Emma traces Emma and Knightley's transition from childhood friends to romantic partners. And in this retelling, I found that it was done in a very gradual, believable way. I really enjoyed the slow build, the tension simmering. I thought that the long-standing friendship was really well developed at the start of the novel, which meant that later on, as the feelings are changing and gradually ramping up a notch in the sexual tension stakes, it meant that the smaller gestures and the teasing that felt very fun at the start began to carry more and more weight, which had an amazing payoff at the end as the romantic shift really kicked in. A lot of that tension arose from the familiarity, the ways that Knightley would get exasperated at Emma's impulsiveness. But it wasn't just him going, oh, for goodness sake. The way that he was written really showed throughout, even when they were #just friends, it really showed his admiration for her intelligence. And it shows the disagreements over the hobbies, her shopping sprees, some of her decisions in life, and his as well. They really felt deep-seated. There are moments in there where and also they say that it's an argument they've had for the 100th time, and you can predict the beats of it, but it doesn't feel like one of those overused, overworn arguments. It's just two people needling one another in the ways that they know how to best, having grown up together. I also really love the way that the authors updated the trope to include more contemporary settings. I mean, obviously it's set in New York, but they really made use of cafes and classrooms and museums as social spaces that kind of chipped away those layers of, oh, it's two rich kids who can't talk about their feelings. It changed it from what could have been that dynamic to, oh, it's two people meeting up and having coffee, and oh my goodness, that bartender is hot, and that is not good. That is going to cause some friction between these two people who are 100% most definitely just friends. So yeah, I thought that the friends to lovers trope and how it was handled, really, really good, satisfying, believable slow burn, and the way that it was written in this novel was, it was wonderful. It was full of humor and insight, and honestly, I absolutely adored it. Emma of 83rd Street has absolutely broken my curse of terrible, terrible non-Pride and Prejudice retellings that I've been reading. So thank you so much for that novel. And now, having raved about those three tropes, it is time for the Hocus Tropus. So, in case you're new here, every episode I take one prominent trope from the main fanfiction book and I recommend a second novel, one not set in the Austenverse, that contains the same trope but done differently. Now, for me, one of the freshest tropes in Emma of 83rd Street was the personal growth girly trope, the personal growth arc. And it's this trope that I want you to keep in the forefront of your mind when I mention this episode's Hocus Tropus. The novel I've gone for is Sam Cheetah's Siri, Who Am I? I read this book in 2025 because I was fascinated by the premise. A glamorous woman wakes up in an LA hospital with no recollection of how she came to be wearing a gorgeous dress or of anything in her life up to this point. The book fascinated me for all of the wrong reasons, including the way it undermined the personal growth trope. Let me sprinkle a little literary critique in here. Having your main character get their memory back is no substitute for character growth, and Mia, our purported heroine in this book, shows no character growth whatsoever. I mean, sure, she does turn her life around in theory as she ditches a billionaire for a poor black man. No, I'm not kidding about the way in which the novel focuses on the main male protagonist's skin color. Mia's character growth was practically non-existent in this book. To say it is a hot mess is an absolute understatement. I loathed almost every page of it, and I think it's a fantastic contrast to Emma of 83rd Street, because you have, the two completely different ways of showing personal growth in a strong female character. One of them, obviously Emma of 83rd Street, I thought was nuanced and humorous, and there was a very deft touch to it. And in Siri, Who Am I thought that Sam Cheetah, no shade, obviously, it's a hard task to write a novel. But Mia, the main character in this novel, is pretty much everything that Emma could have been had she not been handled so well. She is this spoilt rich kid who gets an idea in her head and decides to just keep on going along in her own bubble and make every single decision in her life without really contemplating on what the repercussions of that are, and without thinking about what those impacts and ramifications might be on her friends. I think that reading Siri, Who Am I was a rather character-building experience, and honestly, I recommend it as one of those team bonding activities, because if you and your friends can get through this novel, you can trauma bond over that and over, I think, pretty much anything. So on that incredibly snarky note, thank you so much for taking the time to listen to this episode. If you have made it this far, consider following the podcast so you can join me on future rambles through the wilds of JAFF or Jane Austen fanfiction. Until next time, may your tea stay hot, your tropes well executed, and your Mr. Darcy tolerable, I suppose.